topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We travel the world to bring you the dynamic people who we meet front and center and behind the scenes in wine, food, spirits, and hospitality. We love sharing their stories and our discoveries with you, our listeners. Right, David?
We sure do, Melanie.
Yeah. So today we're going to take you to Sicily. It's a region we've been to many times. And we had a really wonderful opportunity to attend the annual Sicilia on Primeur, which is, it happens every year. It happened in May 2025, and we just came back. And it is the presentation of new vintages from throughout Sicily. Now, interestingly, locals call Sicily a continent. It's really only separated from mainland Italy by the Straits of Messina. You can take a ferry from the top of Sicily to Calabria, and we need to do that sometime.
Well, they've been talking about building a bridge for decades, but it hasn't quite happened yet, but everybody still keeps talking about it and how easy travel to Sicily will be once that happens. Maybe it's still in the works. We're not sure. Anyway, Sicily's a great place. We love going there, and we're going to talk about it today.
Yeah, and what's neat is we flew Delta through JFK. And now, as we were coming back from Sicily, we saw that, I think it's seasonal, but Delta now offers a direct nonstop JFK to Catania flight. That's like so awesome because we want to go back.
Yeah, I think it's a seasonal flight, so they do it in the summertime, but you never know.
You never know.
There's always flights to Palermo.
But it's really a great thing. Now this year, so the program moves around. We've been to Taormino, near Etna. We've been to Palermo. But this year we were based in Modica, and that's in southern Sicily on the kind of eastern side, right, David?
It's down in the southeast corner of Sicily,
so it's
south of Syracuse.
Right. So you're closer to the Mediterranean Sea. There's some mountains to the north. And what's neat about Modica, it's a very steep city, and it's known for its chocolate production.
Yeah, and it's not on the coast. It's actually inland a little bit. So it's actually kind of built into canyon of sorts, and you have to drive down the hill into the ravine, and there's the city, which is built along all the sides of the different sections of the ravine. It's really quite beautiful.
Really quite beautiful. We stayed
it's a medieval town. That's
right. We stayed at the Modica Beach Resort, which was closer to the beach. Yeah. And it's a beautiful area. Now, there were lots of grand tastings and master classes enabling us to try the different range of wines and new releases from throughout Sicily. But one of the highlights every year for Sicilia on Primeur is the opportunity to do mini field trips, which is what we call them. And we choose to go to different areas. So we're going to actually touch on the two field trips that we went to separately and share our findings. And hopefully in another visit, we'll switch and you can go to where I went and I can go to where you went. Both regions were in this southeastern area of Sicily. We didn't go to the far west or anything like that. That's another trip because it's a very big mass of land. So I'll start. So I was really excited, David, because the trip that I was assigned took me on a bucket list. I call it the wine bucket list, to the UNESCO Heritage Site of Ceresole di Vittoria, DOCG. It's interesting. It is the first DOCG in Sicily, and right now the only DOCG. It was elevated to Denominazione di Origine Controllata e Garantita in 2005. Prior, it was a DOC.
And just for everybody's knowledge, DOCG is the highest level of quality in wine in Italy.
That's right.
as pertains to the wine classification system.
Exactly. And the production area is very specific as per DOCG. It is in this wine, which is red, may only be produced in the areas of Ragusa, Catania, and Caltanissetta zones in southeastern Sicily. And within that are subzones for the Ceresuola di Vittoria Classico, DOCG, which is Acate, Comiso, and Vittoria. The name actually, Ceresuola means cherry red, and these are very intense cherry blackberry wines, very beautiful wines that are a required blend of Frappato, which is a native grape to the area, very fresh, fruity, almost like they call it the Gamay of Sicily, and Nero d'Avola, which adds more elegance and tannin. So Frappato is low tannin, fresh, juicy strawberries. Nero d'Avola, which is grown elsewhere in Sicily, is more blackberry and plum and more tannins. Marry the two with specific guidelines for percentages, and you've got Ceresuola di Vittoria. Ceresuola means cherry in Vittoria because it's of Vittoria. And I learned doing my research that the name Vittoria was born in Vittoria when its founder, Vittoria Colonna Henriques, decided to give the first 75 settlers 1 hectare of land on the condition that they can cultivate other hectares of vineyards. So it's got a very interesting history. And there is a town which we visited called Vittoria as well that is filled with beautiful Baroque architecture. I learned that there's a lot of money in this area because it is massive farmland, massive producing of Vittoria tomatoes, eggplants, oranges, lemons, beautiful olives, and cocoa for the chocolate are all produced here in eggplant and exported around the world. So the agricultural bounty of this fertile farmland is significant, along with table grapes and wine grapes. Anyway, that was my chore. Now, I can either go into the wines now or let you share where you went, and then we can talk about the different areas. What would you prefer, David?
Well, I'll touch on where I went. You went to Ceresuola di Vittoria, which is not quite the southeast corner of Sicily.
No, it's more
I actually went to Noto, N-O-T-O, which is the southeast corner of Sicily. Literally, it's right down in the corner of the island, and it's just a beautiful area. It's kind of remote. It's maybe an hour and a half or almost 2 hours south of Syracuse, and really quite beautiful. And it is the home of a city called Avola, which is where Nero d'Avola, which is Sicily's probably most famous red grape at this point, is said to have originated.
Yeah, Nero d'Avola is grown throughout Sicily, but as you say, it was born in Avola. That's the d'Avola. And it's in Ceresuola, which is it's an integral part of making Ceresuola di Vittoria. So their relatives are all the same. I think you were a region over. So I was more south central and you were more southeastern. And Syracuse, by the way, we've been there. There was a Sicilia on Primeur that took place there. That's a gorgeous, gorgeous city. Baroque architecture as well. And the ancient city of Ortigia is there, a wonderful tourist destination with a lot of history.
Yeah,
did you go to Ortigia when you were there?
I did not, but I did go. We did spend some time in Syracuse, which was just gorgeous.
It's just stunning. Yeah. You know, one of the nice things about these little mini field trips is that you taste a lot of wine, but you also have great food and learn about the cuisine. And they also take you to some architectural and cultural attractions. For me, a highlight was the Donna Fugata Castle, which was owned by a very wealthy baron who had kind of a sense of humor. He liked to pull pranks on people. Throughout our tour, we learned about these like practical jokes he would play on his guests and all his paramours. They hid here and there, and there's actually a labyrinth where he used to have little trysts and whatnot. It's very elegant. Donna Fugata, which we know is the name of a winery of no relation. It means woman in flight. And there's a lot of symbolic significance to the name Donna Fugata in Sicily.
Yeah, it's really quite an interesting place and a very special place in the city of Ragusa.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful. And well, there's two. There's the one we went to, which is a villa, and then there's a bigger castle elsewhere. And then the city of Vittoria, where I also went, is just filled with art, a beautiful theater, And as I said, there's a lot of money down there because people are making major agricultural products and exporting them to the world. So that was surprising.
And they've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not a recent development.
No,
this really has been that agriculture of, lemons and nuts and fruit and tomatoes and of course wine has been the backbone of this region's ability to make money for quite some time.
What's always interesting about Sicily, David, is that wine has been made there for generations, dating back. They always take you to the Etruscans wherever you go. This is an area that's been invaded by many cultures, whether it's the French, the Spanish, the Greek, the Arabs. There's a lot of multicultural, but modern Sicily, modern winemaking really is fairly recent, like the late 20th century and the 21st century. It's always interesting when you hear that and they go, we came in 2005, which for you and me, that's kind of recent.
It is recent. My family had already bought and sold a winery by then.
Right.
So we, I think to put in context again, Sicily has been making wine for millennia.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it was cheap jug style wine that was just meant for drinking around the family table, and nobody ever bottled it. And most of it was sold off in bulk to other regions of Italy and Europe to help fortify their wines, whether it's color or alcohol or fruit component. It was a very popular wine to ship off to other regions. And Noto, there was a winery in Noto that I visited, which did exactly that for a couple of hundred years before they decided to privatize themselves.
I love that, a couple of hundred years.
Yeah.
So modern Sicilian wine production is, in the scheme of the world of wine, more recent. And it has been a game changer. Because Sicily imports, I don't know the exact numbers, but a significant amount of its wine is exported around the world. And the United States is a major market for Sicilian wines. And they are prized now. And they're so different by region. As we said, everywhere we went, every speech, every presentation, somewhere in there was the words, Sicily is a continent. It is that belief that it is unto itself. And when you go there, it really does feel different. You're in Italy, but you feel a world away. It's very special.
I think it was Alessio Planeta that of the Planeta family, who has 5 wineries on Sicily, who first coined the term, don't talk about it as an island, talk about it as a continent.
And I think we get it. And, every time we go, it's a new discovery. And the wines are terrific. And the great thing about Sicilia and Primeur is we can taste all the wines. There are technical tastings and more. One day is white, one day is Rosado, there's sparkling, and then, of course, the reds. Why don't we talk a little bit about our discoveries in each area? And we won't touch on it in great detail, but just for all of you who are watching and listening, these are producers that you should know. And we'll first talk about what makes each region special. As I said before, Vittoria in this region is known for Cerasuolo di Vittoria. Now, a couple of things. It is only made here. It is only made in these subzones. And for Pato, the red, juicy red grape that I aforementioned is only produced in this area, whereas Nero d'Avola is produced elsewhere. The wines, being DOCG, must be comprised of 50% to 70% Nero d'Avola and 30 to 50% Frappato, and aged a minimum of 18 months. Okay, now this is cool. So as I said before, Cerasuolo means red. The soils are also red. That's a distinguishing factor, and it's very different from where you were for the soils. They're called terra rossa. And when you see red soil, it's rich in iron and minerals. What's interesting about these soils is they literally form a sand clay blanket over a subsoil made of white limestone. Why is that significant? Because as the roots burrow into the more porous sandy soils, they have to dig deeper into the limestone soils. And we all know in wine, poor and struggling is important because you want the soil to be poor and difficult, and you want the wine, the vines to struggle more to get that water, because that makes the fruit more beautiful.
Exactly. That's what we always used to say at our winery when I was giving tours. Grapes love a struggle. Right. So
and so this was formed because this area was covered by the sea, right?
Well, a long time ago,
but
it's also volcanic. as well. So there's lots going on in Eastern Sicily to talk about in terms of terroir or soil types. That's for sure.
But this is a distinguishing thing about the Terra Rossa. And the silt and whatnot from Etna, which is an active volcano and had a little issue and exploded after we left. That comes down. It always explodes after we leave.
I know.
And then the seabeds, which once covered this area, leaves fossils. So you've got rocks and limestone and fossils and silt. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's really neat. And the soils in Noto, where I was, are the same types of soils, but there's no iron in them. So they're white. It's a really interesting
The pictures
soil.
are amazing.
Yeah.
So how far roughly would you say Noto is from the Vittoria area where I was, the Ragusa area, where I had the Terra Rossa soils?
I'm going to say it's an hour.
But it's interesting. Yeah, but it was interesting. Even at like one of the wineries, Valle della Cata, which is now a sixth generation, run by a sixth generation family member. She showed us 7 different soils amongst her 70 hectares of vineyards, ranging from the red to black and crumbly to white and sandy with stones to just super white and sandy and super poor. And they each were utilized to grow specific grape varieties.
Well, I think that's kind of the joke on Sicily a lot of the time, because a lot of the hilltops, they're affected by so many different things and so many different origins that it's, you want to learn about the soil? How much time do you have?
I kind of like it. And I like it I love it when they actually show the soil and then they show the wine and then you taste the wine.
And then you taste the wine.
Yeah.
And you really can taste the soil in the wine.
You can.
Taste that terroir and taste where it comes from. I think it's an amazing spot. You want to talk about your wines and your wineries that you visited?
So here's something I learned. There's actually a wine trail. So what's growing in popularity throughout Italy and especially Sicily is wine tourism. And we're kind of excited about that because we're all over it. And so they have a Cereswalla di Vittoria wine trail, which I think I got a mini taste of. And within that, some of the wineries have agritourism, so you can actually stay there or nearby. And that's wonderful if you're driving around, or you can, we worked with Just Sicily, wonderful tour company that took us around because you don't want to drink and drive. Okay, I'm going to start. These are all family run or familial in some way. My first one was Terra di Giuffro, Giurfo. It's owned by a German family. Achille Alessi greeted us. They all of them make the same wines. His wine that I love the most was called Mascaria Barricotta Cereswalla di Vittoria. It's a beautiful wine. The winery itself is I'm not sure how old it is, but it's in southeastern in the Dirillo River Valley. There's a couple of river valleys, and beautiful expression. The next one was Maggiovini, the family owned, and they have different vineyards. We tried wines from the different crews. Santa Teresa, which is named after a wandering monk, is owned by siblings from Trentino, Stefano Marino Girelli. I do have an importer with them, VS Imports, and they actually did a beautiful presentation with a lunch prepared by a local chef of Ragusa, whose restaurant is called Monsu, Chef Salvatore Monsu. It was terrific. And one of the ones I liked there was actually an aromatic white. It was called Insieme, which means together. And it's blended from Albanello, which is a local variety, Zabibo, and Fiano. The Zabibo and Fiano were aged in stainless, and the Albanello in amphora. I loved it because it was so fresh, and when it's hot, that's what you want, that aromatic wines. I found the wines in this area, the whites, to be very aromatic. The Frappato, consistently fresh and fruity, and the Cereswalla di Vittoria, kind of the elegant style that many say you would have instead of a Pinot Noir.
Yeah, and to touch base on Zabibo, for those who may have heard of it or seen it in the store, it's fairly widely planted in the Mediterranean, but mostly known as Muscat of Alexandria. So it's one of the Muscat strains and clones, and it's a delightful, very aromatic, crisp white.
It is throughout the Mediterranean. We also learned, and I haven't been, I don't think you've been, it's very it's grown widely in Western Sicily. and it's part of the.
It's all over Sicily.
Yeah.
But
And
so Cebibo is Muscat of Alexandria,
Yeah,
but they
and
call it Cebibo on Sicily, and it's
Right.
very, very well received and grown widely all over the island.
Valle Delicata, which I referenced earlier, is a historic family founded by Gaetano Giocano in the 19th century, now run by his sixth generation great granddaughter Gaetana, who we've interviewed on the Connected Table several years ago.
She's a doll. We love her.
This winery is located in the Classico subzone, Acate, as I mentioned before. There were 3. She gave us this amazing tour of those 7 different soil types and showed how they represented wines in her area. I got to tell you, her Chirasuolo di Vittoria Classico, the Iri da Iri, which is a Classico, was probably one of the best. Skurnik Wines carries it. Mm-hmm. She also introduced us to a wine. I don't think it's in the market yet in the United States, but it was made in the ancestral method of sparkling Frappato, like a pet nat. Mm-hmm. Really, really good. Really well received. It's called Fil d'Oro Frappato Metodo Ancestral. And I think it would be really popular like here in New Orleans when the weather's hot. As I said, Skurnik Wines is their importer. The next 2 wines are what I call the culty wines right now. They are totally into natural winemaking and biodynamic and have a huge following right now of people who embrace natural winemaking. The first is Kos, C-O-S. Kos was founded. Wonderful wines. It's an old winery that was taken over and modernized in 1980 by 3 friends, Giambattista Ciglia, Giusto Occhipinti, and Cirino Strano. And so the name is COS comes from the first letter of each last name. And we met Giambattista Ciglia and Giusto Occhipinti, who gave us a tour. They are so proud of their amphora room. It's just dozens and dozens of rows of amphora, specifically made to produce a label called Pithos. And we tasted several of the Pithos line as well as the non-amphora wines. The Nero d'Avolo aged in amphora was terrific, as was a white wine made with a local grape called Garganico, which is a relative of Garganego up in Suave. Really terrific. But all the wines had this, I was thinking about it before the show. I was trying to think how to compare it when you love the wines, but it's like looking at a piece of jewelry and then polishing it. It was already beautiful, and then when you polish it, it kind of has that boom, and that's what these wines had, that boom. Like suddenly they became more intense and beautiful. So that's COS.
So there's another Occhipinti that you met,
and I got a gal crush on her.
We need to talk about because she's a real rock star in the area, and all over the world for what she's doing. So talk about her. She
was mentored by her uncle Giusto Occhipinti. Right. Her name is Arianna Occhipinti. I think we're going to be booking her on this show for a one-on-one interview. She has become one of the most respected voices in Sicily's natural wine movement. She actually got her start working with Uncle Giusto Occhipinti at Kos at age 16, worked her way around, and then started her own business at the age of 22. It's a very modern-looking winery. She is kinetic. All I can say, she just is kinetic and passionate. She exudes that Sicilian passion, and the wines reflect that. She took us in the vineyards and was like intensely showing us those beautiful red brick Terra Rossa soils. When we went to the tasting room, the walls were lined with flip charts and dozens of Post-it notes in her handwriting because she's trying to work on branding sessions. And Alessio Planeta has been as part of her council of advisors,
council of elders,
along with Giusto Occhipinti. I noticed Alessio was taking all of her Occhipinti's wines at the gala dinner to have at his table. They really are terrific. I don't have specifics on the wines. I have to look at my phone. That means looking down. But the importer in the United States is Bowler Wines.
Yeah, David Bowler. Sure.
These wines will bowl you over.
Yeah,
they're really terrific. And it's just, as I said, it's like having a beautiful piece of jewelry, and then suddenly you polish it and give it another look, and you're like, boom, this is something different. So again, we've got Arianna Occhipinti, Kos, Valle Delicata, Santa Teresa, Maggiovini, and Terra di Giuffro are the wineries I visited. There are many more in the wine trail, which you can find by going to the Consortio website, and you will find the whole kit and caboodle, as they say, of wonderful wineries, including, I think, Donna Fugata has one. David, let's start with where you went now.
Well, Noto, which is where I went, is a bunch of different things. It's the southeast corner, as we talked about earlier. The soils are white limestone soils and very old, very beautiful, gently rolling hills. It's on the coast. It's actually on two coasts. So it's on the south coast and also on the east coast, because it goes right down to the corner of the island or continent, shall we say. But it's a beautiful region, as I said, fairly remote. There's not a lot of wineries there, but there's a lot of grapes grown there. And it is the reputed original home of the grape Nero d'Avola, because which stems from the city of Avola, which is within Noto, the region. And then there's also the city of Noto, which is a beautiful Baroque city. Lots of tourists go there. It's got a gorgeous cathedral. It's beautiful Baroque architecture in town. It's a very pretty city. It's quite popular to visit as a day trip from Syracuse. And so that's kind of the layout of Noto, the area. The region is mostly populated by small wineries. And all the ones that I visited were either family owned or partner owned, which means a couple of different people got together and bought a winery. So it's a very interesting region. It's kind of off the beaten track, but there's some key players from Italy and the region itself who are really kind of making Noto into a force within the Sicilian wine movement.
Well, like who?
Well, let's start with the list, shall we?
Okay.
Another one thing I want to say is that it's also the driest area in Sicily to make wine and grow grapes. So there's very little rainfall there. So the grapes struggle. There's not. Yeah. And it's good for the grapes, of course, because as we say, grapes like a struggle. But it's a very dry, very sunny region. There's a lot of carob grown there, which you can make carob powder and chocolate, things like that. So there's carob grown there as well. There's a lot of olives grown there. There's a lot of lemons grown there. And of course, there's a lot of grapes grown there.
This is an agricultural bounty. Well. So I'm looking at a map just before you start, just to give our viewers and listeners context. If you look at Sicily, the continent, where he's talking about is literally the corner, the lowest corner of the southeast. So to the south is the Mediterranean Sea, and literally at the corner, it connects to the Ionian Sea. So this is an area deeply impacted by Greece. You're very close to Greece. And if you head upwards up the coast, you're going straight up to Taormina. I know there's some day trippers that go from Taormina down to Syracuse and Ortigia and then Calabria. So this is the far west. And you said it's very dry. It was very dry where we were too, which is nice. So tell us about the wineries.
Well, I want to say that we only stayed in one place. We didn't move around a lot. So
nice.
So it's small enough a region where you can actually pick a hub and pick a base, and you can just do day trips from there if you're going to spend a few days touring around. And we actually stayed at a beautiful hotel called the Villa Giulia Hotel, which is I think it was an old winery or farm, and they turned it into a beautiful hotel with maybe about 25 or 30 different rooms, but they're all kind of cottages and things like that are built into the old barns. It's really lovely. My room was a completely private cottage, and it had a hot tub.
How come we never have that when we're actually in the rooms together?
Lots of fun, and the food was delicious, and they have a beautiful pool, etc. Well, needless to say, let's move on. Let's talk about the wines. The first winery, we were there for 2.5 days. The first winery we went to was called Zisola. And it's owned by the Mazzei family. Now, you've heard of the Mazzeis if you've been to Tuscany.
Yes. And
this leg of the Mazzei family is Filippo, who's one of the two brothers that are involved in the Tuscan wines and they all own. So Filippo found this farm in the early 2000s and fell in love with it and decided he was going to start to make wine there. So he revitalized all the vineyards and planted a lot more. And it's a beautiful old historic farmhouse with a lovely winery around it now. And he spends a bit of time there himself as well. But the wines are lovely. Give me 1 second here. The wines are great. It's in the, as I said, the southeast corner. It's a 50-hectare property, and he has probably about 25 hectares of fruit that he grows as well. It's not a huge winery, but some nice wines.
Is that all grapefruit?
Nice
grapes, or are there other?
24 hectares of vine.
Goodness.
So that's about 75. It's about 60 or 65 acres of fruit, right? It's a beautiful landscape. They have wonderful wines. The wines he produces, some whites from Grillo, which is another very popular white wine.
What would you compare Grillo to for anyone who's not had it?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's why I'm asking it.
Yeah. I'm going to say, production-wise, it's probably the Pinot Grigio of Sicily.
But it tastes completely different.
It's got lovely citrus notes and aromatics to it.
You get the grapefruit and citrus, but you get a lot of aromat and a lot of herb, because this is the scrub.
Yeah,
I call it the scrub of the area.
I find it's a lot more lively on the palate than Pinot Grigio is, which tends to just sit on your palate.
And it ages nicely. We've had some very nice aged Grillo. Yeah.
So his Aziza is a 100% Grillo, but it's a Grillo that he gives some skin contact to. So it's kind of got a Grillo with a modern twist. There's a lot of Grillo made on Sicily, as we know, but this is skin contact Grillo. Which kind of brings down the vibrancy a little bit and makes it a little more linear, but it's also still very bright. A lot of florals in the nose. It's a lovely wine. And then he makes a number of reds as well, of course, from Nero d'Avola, because it's the local grape, right? But the Nero d'Avolas I find in Noto are very unlike the Nero d'Avola that you get on the west side of Sicily, like in places like Menfi, where they grow a lot of grapes and make a lot of wine. The Nero d'Avolas from Noto are more elegant. They've got more freshness. They've got more acidity to them. They're much more of a delicate style of Nero d'Avola.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's the soil.
Yeah.
The soil has a lot to do with that. Chalky, white limestone soil brings a lot of minerality to the wine and sapidity to the wine that you don't get in the clay soils of Western.
Why don't you explain to someone who may not know that?
Saltiness.
Okay. Excuse me, my souvenir.
It's also very close to the sea, because literally the vines are maybe 3 or 4 kilometers from the sea, maybe 10 at the most. So, I was standing in a vineyard looking at the sea off in the distance. That's how close it is.
So here's an interesting fun fact.
So that sea air comes in and affects those vines as well.
I call sapidity sea breeze.
Yeah.
So, here's a fun fact, by the way. Grillo is also used to make Marsala, which is the flagship wine. Yeah. Fun fact.
I love Marsala.
Just like Zabibo, the Muscat d'Alexandria, is the base wine for Besito de Pantelleria, where you've been. I haven't. Different coast, but just fun fact.
Yeah, Zabibo.
Yeah.
Grillo and Zabibo. But one of the neat things I found in this region was they also are doing other things. They're not just strictly using the native grapes. They're also kind of going out on a limb and making wines from the international varieties as well. So the Effa-Emi, which is a red wine that Zisola makes, is a Petit Verdot based wine.
Oh, no.
And really quite good. And then they also make other native white wine grapes that they make into wine. They make a beautiful Catarratto, which we know from Etna.
But it's grown widely around Sicily.
But they also grow it down there as well.
They do it a little bit in the Cerasuolo area, but a little bit.
So moving on to the next one, which I just fell in love with that I could move there, was Giacero Winery, which is, again, started in the early 2000s. Right. So we're getting a pattern here, right? Old winemaking facility, kind of fell into disrepair. Somebody comes along and takes it over and makes it into a modern place.
Because land was cheap and they scooped them up for probably great deals.
So this was owned by Giovanni Baroli. Now, he called himself he said his family had a printing business.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so what did you print? He goes, well, dictionaries. Well, his dictionaries are in every home in Europe. So he had a very successful printing and publishing business.
But you would never know it.
But you'd never know it because he's just the nicest, soft-spoken guy.
Yeah.
And he basically retired from his family business to go create his own business in Sicily when he and his wife, who's from Venice and he's from Piedmont, fell in love with this property and bought it and decided to renovate the winery and turn it into what it is today. The wines are fabulous. They did have a consulting winemaker whose name escapes me at the moment, but they have bought their estate in 2004 and began renovating it. It's in between Modica and Noto. So it's and all of that's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, by the way. The Giassera means it's an Arabic word, or it comes from an Arabic word that means island. So it's their own little island. And that's the way they live it. They live there pretty much full time. They spend very little time up in Piemonte or Venice at this point. And the wines are just delicious. And I was very taken with what they're making. They again do Grillo, Catarratto. They also make Chardonnay and Merlot. They do Nero d'Avola, of course, and then they do a Moscato Bianco, not Zabibo, which is Muscat of Alexandria, but Moscato Bianco, which is a different grape. And Moscato Bianco is really the main Muscat that's grown in the Noto region. Okay, so there's a lot of that. Just so you
know why I'm looking that way, like we're having a mini hurricane.
Yeah, I think
hurricane season just started.
Yeah, what the heck?
The trees are kind of sideways.
Anyway, let's get to the wines because I could wax poetic about the winery and the people that run it.
Let's go to the wines
the entire time.
So we've got like this much left.
So the wines I loved, the Bianco was a mix of Moscato, Chardonnay, and Catarratto. A really lovely mix. 6 months aging. It was all done in stainless steel. A lovely wine, great high acidity, floral notes, bright. Just a lovely wine. Then there was a wine that was kind of the step up white, which was Caratan, which is a Catarratto Lucido variety. It's a particular clone of Catarratto, which I hadn't actually heard of before. And then again, 6 months aging in stainless steel, much more dense and intense of a wine. And then one that I thought was amazing. He's the only person that I've met outside of Mount Etna that is growing Nerello Mascalese. And I asked him about this while we were having lunch, which was fabulous, by the way. And I said, "Why are you growing Nerello?" I said, "Nobody's growing it outside of Etna." He goes, "Well, I was talking to a friend of mine up on Etna, and he said, give it a try." So I did.
And how did it work?
And it's delicious. It's a vastly different style of Nerello Mascalese than the Nerello Mascalese that you get on from Etna's volcanic soils. And it was very interesting to try. It's a softer, warmer Nerello Mascalese than the ones that you get on Etna, which are kind of light Piemontese style wines that have a lot of tension to them. This doesn't have that, but it really brings out the
more plush,
the plushness.
Yeah, we think so.
And the floral notes that that Nerello can provide, violets, red fruit, etc. But also because of the soils of Noto, it's got minerality and it's got chalkiness, sapidity, exactly. Sapidity. A lovely wine, and of course, his Nero d'Avola, which was another one of his flagships, was a delightful wine, just delicious. So the next wine we went to was in the town of Marzamemi. I keep getting that wrong. I've gotten it wrong the entire time.
That's a very cool place.
Marzamemi,
There's a lot of history and culture there.
Yeah, it was called Cantina Ramadini,
right?
And it's not a new winery. This was the one that I said sold off in bulk for a long time before they actually privatized. So this was bought in the early 2000s by a group of friends who decided to invest and privatize the winery. And they've been on that unique path ever since. They've got 27 hectares of vineyards, all organic, and they make all their wines organically as well. It's a really interesting project, and the wines are very nice. And I thought what was interesting about Marzamemi, which is a very unique old fishing town, it's right down in the corner of Noto, and so you can see it. You can look off in the distance, and you see where the two sections of the Mediterranean Sea meet at the corner. And there's an old fort on an island down off that coast. Yeah, because all of a sudden you round the corner, and then all of a sudden you're heading back up towards Marsala at the other end of the island. So Cantina Ramadini and Marzamemi, beautiful area. The winery is a very old historic winery, and you could actually see, because it was a bulk wine facility for a long time, you can see where they actually had huge tanks, and they would gravity feed the tanks through pipelines out to the port to fill the ships.
Oh, wow.
And those pipelines are still in existence.
Wow.
Yeah, they don't use them anymore, but they're still in existence. And again, it's an exciting time for them. I think they're really coming along, and we tasted some very nice wines. Again, they make Caricante. They make a couple of Charmat wines, a couple of sparkling wines in the Charmat method, which are also very nice. They make Nero d'Avola, and they also make a Syrah, which was quite interesting and I really liked it a lot. And then they also make a Pasito. So they're kind of making a whole gamut of different wines. And again, one of the younger wineries, and it's a work in progress. And I think it's exciting to see what they're going to do.
And the name again is?
Cantina Ramadini.
Cantina Ramadini.
Yeah.
Do they have an importer? Do you know?
They do not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, they do not yet. So you're just gonna have to go there and try it.
Yeah.
And then the next wine I went to is an old favorite family of ours. We've been to a couple of their other wineries, and it's Feudo Macari, which is the Noto winery for the Moretti Cusseri family, who owns Sette in. Who we've been to and we've talked about ad nauseum, shall we say, because we love their wine so much.
We were just there.
We were just there, yeah. We were there in February. Sette Ponti is in Tuscany, and the Moretti Cusseri family owns 5 or 6 wineries. This is their Noto facility. The wines are amazing. Again, they kind of got into it not that long ago. The winery's fairly new. And they own 265 hectares. That's a pretty decent sized chunk of land.
Huge.
About 700
compared
acres,
to the 50
maybe more.
to 60 you were just talking about.
I think that's
Yeah, that's huge.
Maybe 700 acres, something like that. And they only have 60 of it planted to vineyards at this point, but that's gonna grow. They built a beautiful winery. They have great little tasting rooms and sales areas and things like that. It's a great spot with lovely wines, and their wines are, I think, some of the best wines in the area, as they should be, right? They make a Grillo, they make a beautiful Caricante Grillo blend.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which I thought was
that's
quite
really
interesting.
more of a ethnic grape.
And that wine is called Family and Friends, right? Even though it's not just family and friends that get to drink it.
We tasted that when we were in Sette Ponti. Also,
it's just delicious, and it's a barrel fermented Caricante Grillo blend, and I just love this wine.
That'd be a nice blend. Yeah, I love.
It's called Family and Friends, only the best grapes. Yeah, that's the name of the wine.
I remember that wine. Yeah. It's very nice.
Yeah. And then they do a single vineyard Grillo called Vigna Firaru. And they do a rosé. They do Nero d'Avola. They do a couple of different Nero d'Avolas, and they're all wonderful, different styles and different agings and different vineyards that they come from.
Did anyone refer to Nero d'Avola by the Sicilian name Calabrese?
No, not the wineries I went to.
Yeah, that's how it's also known as, because everything has a dialect.
So they actually have a project that they're working on, which is 2 different wines where they're both single vineyard wines, and they're separating all this out and not putting it into any other wines that they make. So they're keeping it single vineyards. And one is called Sultana, and the other, you're going to love this. The other is called Guarnaschelli. A shout out.
Oh gosh.
A shout out to our great friend Alex Guarnaschelli, the chef. And those are beautiful single vineyard Nero d'Avolas. And the fruit so their fruit is albarello, which is bush vines.
Yep.
They don't trellis them.
Yep.
So it's everything at that winery is that. Lovely wines. And then, of course, they make a Syrah, which, again, going to the international side of things, they make a beautiful Syrah called Maharas. And the wines were just lovely. The last winery that I went to is one that we had the owner on our show last fall after we went to Etna and talked about all his wineries. And I said, I've got to get to this one because it just sounds so good. Who was it? Alessio Planeta.
Alessio Planeta. Right.
The Planeta family's wines are all over Sicily and all over the world. And this was Planeta Buonavini in Noto. Oh. And it's their Noto facility. And it's all the Planeta wineries are independent of each other. They don't grow things everywhere and then make them in one spot. Each winery is a separate winery with a separate team, separate viticulture, separate winemaking.
A separate winemaker, or is it Patricia Toth oversees?
Patricia Toth oversees a lot of it, but they have people on site that are there, and I think she makes the decisions.
Right. So Patricia Toth is the executive winemaker over all the Planeta wineries. Yeah. She's amazing.
Yeah, she is great, and we saw her while we were there.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So Alessio and his family purchased the property in 1998. And it, as I said earlier, Noto is the driest region. And I think in Sicily, I think I got really the best visual of that dryness and that dry region while I was at their winery, which is just white, dry, chalky soil.
Wow.
And it's
was it very thin chalky, really chalky, or sandy?
Sandy chalky.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's that powdery,
beautiful wines, and you almost didn't know the winery was there because there's just a little cabin up on top of a knoll in the middle of this beautiful dale, which is where the winery and the olive groves and vineyards sit. And then there was this little cabin up on the top, and you parked at the cabin, and you're like, "Where's the winery?" Well, the winery was underneath it. They built the winery into the side of the hill.
Oh, interesting.
And they also have a wonderful contemporary art collection there as well. But really, it's the wines that take center stage. Again, they have 40 hectares. And it's olives, it's carob, it's grapes.
Grapes. Everybody has olives. Everybody has an olive because they have a side hustle doing olive oil.
There's also a lot of almonds grown there, I found out.
Yeah, I mean, it is an agricultural bounty. And I feel like we need to take another suitcase to take back all the wonderful things, right?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the wines because they obviously grow Nerodavolo. And they also grow Moscato Bianco, which is the second, I say, most important grape in Noto, right? There's those two wines. Yeah. Those two wines is what is made the most of. So they do a couple of Moscato Biancos. They do a beautiful Nerodavola called Contradanza. And then they have a Santa Cecilia Nerodavola. And we tasted a few vintages of those while I was there, which was very interesting to see the different vintages back up next to each other and taste them side by side. They make, again, a beautiful frappato.
Because they have
because they also have a place in Vittoria as well.
In Vittoria, right.
So we actually got to taste the wines from Vittoria while we were there because it was so close. They figured,
so they
why not just throw them into the tasting? Course. So we got to taste the frappato, the Cereswolo de Vittoria, and a couple of versions of that. But really, it's the wines that they grow there that are the stars. The Moscato Bianco. They don't grow a lot of different types of grapes here because they do that in other places that they make wine. So they really kind of focus on what's in Noto at the Noto winery, and I kind of like that about them. We don't have a lot of time left, but just quickly, how would you compare the Moscato Bianco here, made in this area, to say elsewhere? Maybe a little more minerality to it. Yeah. Again, sapidity. I think we should all be looking harder at Moscato Bianco and not putting it into the sweet wine category corner because it's really quite amazing and versatile, particularly with the spicy foods that we all love. And this area is known for this specific type of wine. Yeah, just to note, the Santa Cecilia which is a Nero d'Avola, is their
Mm-hmm.
top wine from that area.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? We can't go on. We're getting a time thing. So we hope you've enjoyed this little mini tour of Sicily, specifically the Val di Noto area and Cerasuolo di Vittoria. We want to thank the organizers of Sicilia on Primeur and their various agencies, including ZCOM and Just Sicily. Those are great tour organizers. We hope we're invited back. We will be bringing you some of the producers that we met on future editions of The Connected Table. You can follow us on Instagram at The Connected Table. You can follow us on YouTube, and you can read our blog at theconnectedtable.com, which documents much more in detail our travels and the people we meet. We encourage you to write and share our shows. And more importantly, we want you to travel, explore, step out of your tasting comfort zone, and always stay insatiably curious like we are.
Take care, everybody.
Ciao.